The May 9th, 2016 meeting of the Oregon School District Board of Education is called to order at 6:30 p.m. Janie, could you call the roll?
Ms. Meany?
Present.
Mr. Alcock?
Present.
Ms. Flanagan? Present.
Present. The board has a quorum. I have proof that the meeting has been properly noticed pursuant to Wisconsin open meetings law, and I will have that notice available for inspection if anyone so desires, so we are set to proceed. The agenda has been posted, and I would need approval of that, a motion to approve that agenda. Do I have that motion? Mr. Raymond moves. Is there a second? Dan Kraus seconds. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We have an agenda. Consent calendar. Is there any item on the consent calendar that any board member wishes removed? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the items on the consent calendar.
Oh. I have some questions about payments.
Generally been our practice that we don't do that. If you have a question, we would prefer that we do that beforehand, but why don't you proceed? Is that for Mr. Weiland?
Well, in last year, we did go over some of this, so yeah, in the past, we have done this. So, yeah, there was something on the budget, or not the budget, but not the financial statement, but the approval of payments, that I really need to know about this. Let me get it. Annoying. Under the purchasing, credit card thing, there was a bill at a Chicago Gina's Southeast Pizza for $7,100. Is that a typo, I hope?
It very well could be. That doesn't ring a bell for me, so I'll have to take a look at that.
Okay. Also, last year, we had spent a lot of time, and I think that this is not the place or the time because it's not on the agenda, but there has been a lot of traveling to both coasts on the taxpayers' expense, and I think we need to discuss that in a different forum right now, but I do want to bring that forward. And
You want something on the agenda, then you just let me know and we'll discuss getting it on.
right.
Thank you.
And are we also talking about minutes?
Is to approve the consent calendar. The minutes are part of that. Would you like the minutes removed?
Yes, please.
Okay, I will remove the minutes of the previous meeting. Is there anything else any board member wishes removed?
Steve, I thought it might just be appropriate to acknowledge some of the donations that have been received.
I've got that, Charlie,
Okay,
so
great.
I will. Thank you. Anything else? Anybody wants removed? I would entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar except for the minutes which Gwen has asked to be removed for separate consideration. Is there a motion to that effect?
Second.
All right, Charlie moves, Gwen seconds, and as Charlie had indicated, there is the donation of slightly more than $8,600 from the Oregon Band Boosters that is subject to our vote and approval, and we thank the Band Boosters for their generosity. We also have several resignations from positions in Oregon: Maureen Purcell, Amy Faulkner, Amy Imel, and Samantha Brenner. We have appreciated their service to the district, would thank them for the time in the district, and we wish them all the best as they move forward. And then we have 6 new staffing assignments, actually 7, including Jessica Holman, who is Jessica Suter, who was a former teacher and administrative intern in the district who moved north and is returning back, and we welcome Jessica back. So those are some of the items that are on the consent calendar for approval pursuant to this motion. Is there any further discussion regarding those items? Seeing none, Janie, could you please call the roll because we have the issuance of new contracts?
Mr. Kraus?
Yes.
Ms. Mateson? Mr. Raymond?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes.
Mr. Uphoff?
Yes.
Ms. Feeney?
Yes.
Mr. Zock?
Yes. Motion carries unanimously for those items on the consent calendar. Gwen, you had a question on the minutes and had asked those to be removed.
Right, on the minutes for April 25th, 2016, page 2, there is a typo under, what is that, 2, reorganization, B, Mrs. Mason nominated, it should be nominated. And I'm not even an English teacher. No, I'm just kidding. Also, I would, on page 5 of that same particular set of minutes, discussion item D, under number 1, OASIS to be part of the referendum addition project at OHS, Mr. Weiland. We also talked about making sure, and I wanted to be on the record, that there was a clear understanding that OASIS would have autonomy, even though it was connected to the school. And I would like to see that put into the minutes, because I believe Charlie discussed that, as did I. So it was not just one person. In order for OASIS to work effectively, it has to, there has to be some autonomous running of the OASIS that isn't necessarily controlled by the administration at the high school. So the teachers are very competent at doing that, and that's the way OASIS has been run in the past. That's the way OASIS has been run in the past, and it's been very effectual.
Charlie?
Yeah, Gwen, my recollection, most of the conversations I recall had to do with concern about whether actual physical attachment of the facility to the high school would present a problem. The autonomy has a much broader implication, and I'm not sure if that's something we shouldn't talk about in more detail in terms of what that would actually look like. I agree that there is some need for some degree of independence there in terms of working with the students. In terms of accountability, my only concern is I'm sure that there's some need to find a way in which OASIS fits into the whole structure in terms of supervision. So I just would like to have that as part of the conversation too.
I would further comment that the purpose of this minute item isn't to detail the discussion which was had, because there was no action on that, and so I'm hesitant to put into the minutes any discussion on any particular point, because that would not reflect any action on the board. And if we were to do that, we would have to put down everyone's comments during that discussion. So I don't view that as an appropriate addition to that particular item. It certainly is something, Gwen, that as we discuss OASIS tonight and take action, it might be appropriate.
Well,
Or part of a motion.
And I understand what you're saying, but I just wanted to make sure that it is on the record, and that there is an understanding that alternative schools have a different operation manual, Charlie, and that's respected, even though that there is an attachment to the building. When, and we can discuss that during the action item, I do believe, but I didn't want it to get buried in this particular minutes, because if it's not written down, sometimes we forget.
Do you have a motion to amend the minutes that is before us?
Well, I'm willing to, if it's put into the minutes concerning the action item, I'm willing to compromise with that.
Making a motion to accept the minutes as presented, Gwen?
With the typo changed, yeah.
Sure. Okay, having, the motion is to change the typo, and with that change, Ms. Maidson moves to approve the minutes of the April 25th meeting, and we would also need to have a motion at the same time to approve the April 11th minutes. Gwen, would you take that motion? for
I will
both?
move that forward as a motion to accept both minutes.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the April 11th and April 25th minutes with the one typo revision in the April 25th minutes. That's been moved by Gwen, seconded by Jeff. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. So that has taken care of the consent agenda.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks, everyone. Communication from the public, the board allots per policy 180.04 the opportunity for the public to address the board. Mr. Weiland?
Thanks. We've been able to chase down that question that Ms. Maidson had regarding the Geno's Pizza. That was for 300-plus people to go on a field trip to Chicago, so that's why the $7,100. It wasn't a typo. That's the kids eating at that restaurant.
Okay, as indicated, the board has policy to provide the public the opportunity to address the board. Is there any member of the public who has signed up, Ms. Wick, to address the board? Is there any member of the public who wishes to address the board? Is there any member of the public who wishes to address the board? Hearing none, we will move to the next item on the agenda, which is the OEA report. Is there any member of the OEA present tonight to provide a report? No one is present. We'll move to the student report. And that's you, Nina.
Yay! Okay, so at the high school, at least for me, there's been a lot going on in the way of AP tests. I had my final one today, so I'm glad those are over, but there are a few more this week yet. So lots of, especially juniors and seniors, have been taking their AP tests at a number of locations, from like St. John's to the gym to the library to the HLR and blended learning lab, and we had all kinds of those going on. So those are just wrapping up. We had, I'm fairly certain it was just this past like 10 days ago or whatever, Saturday, that there was thespian initiation at the high school. So for like people who are into drama, they had their thespian initiation. We have a couple of track meets at Oregon this week that are evidently really big ones, I guess. So the Tom Miller invite, I think, is Friday, and I think there's another, I don't know if it's a relay meet or something, tomorrow at Oregon. So we're hosting a couple of big ones this week. Seniors are putting up their handprints later this week. I think it's supposed to be Wednesday. We're doing our handprints on the wall near the staff lounge. If you ever get a chance to go check out those. Senior student council members chose maroon, navy blue, and dark gray to put our handprints on the wall, those colors. Yeah, kind of just a lot of things happening in the way of preparing for AP tests and finals. So. And then obviously all the sports are still happening. Clubs are tending to wrap up. FFA, I know, had a competition like a week and a half ago or 2 weeks ago now that they did well at. And yeah, you guys have any questions?
How many days left till graduation?
I think it's like 24 or something like that. School days.
Not anyone's counting in
Right.
particular? Okay.
Yeah. No, not at all.
And prom is this coming weekend?
Oh yeah, thank you. That's what I was reading. Prom is Saturday. So that's in Madison. We get to have it off campus. That's just juniors and seniors unless you have a date who's a junior or a senior. So that should also go really well. And there's I don't think there's an orchestra concert coming up, but I know there is a choir concert on Thursday this week if you guys want to check that out.
Any other questions for Nina? Great, thanks, Nina. That takes us to the first of our action items. We have two of them tonight. First is acceptance of the 2016-2017 staffing plan, and the second one would be approval to relocate to Oasis. So the first one is the 2016-2017 staffing plan, and the way that I'd like to approach this is have Brian provide us with an overview of where we're at, give us some information about the staffing plan. We have some additional information in our packet since the last meeting, and then provide us with the administration's recommendation. So Brian, the floor is yours.
I will start with the end in mind, and with the end in mind, and I can come back to it. It's approve the high school, the 9-12 staffing plan is attached. The board's already taken action. K8. Based on budget projections, the administrative team is not recommending any additional staffing at this time. We will continue to monitor the budget and student enrollments, and as written, as Gina put together in our last appendix, we'll be back in July to take a look at enrollment projections, particularly at the elementary level, and then again back on, I believe it's October 24th, when Andy has all the final budget numbers in. But I do have a couple of updates along the way. We've provided you with 8 appendix items. I'm just going to note the ones that changed from last time's report. Appendix 3 was staff request. We added a costing component at your request. Steve gave me a call and let me know that that he received a couple of questions from fellow board members on the cost differences on pages 4 and pages 9 and 10. Page 4 of the report it looks at budget information, and that's more of a budget cost for new teachers, and typically elementary teachers, it tends to be easier for us to project that budget cost. On pages 9 and 10, Gina actually used what I will term, these are not her words, these are my words, sort of the real costs of replacing some of the positions that often will have a master's degree, like school psychologists. You can see that cost has jumped significantly. So those higher costs, again, typically are associated with positions that have master's degrees. And if you have more questions, Gina can give you a very long explanation. I'm giving you the short one. Next is Appendix 5. Steve had a conversation with me about the concept of compression, and I'm sure you've heard that before. In essence, compression is when in the old days, we would take off salary steps at the beginning, and teachers would get compressed into a similar salary lane. I asked Gina to put together some background information. I thought it was really helpful because it dusted off my memory, and it reminded me of our pre-Act 10 days when we had what most schools in the state have, which is a traditional salary schedule. Then I was reminded of that painful event in 2011 with Act 10 when we froze all employees' pay. So that created some compression right then, because teachers that we hired in 2011 and 12 started at the same salary that the previous year's teachers were at, which created a compression factor. Then we moved to the implementation of base wage bargaining. We raised the beginning salary 2 times. There was a request to raise the beginning teacher's salary 3 times, but through the base wage negotiations, we ended up just doing it twice, and that was first in 2012, and then most recently in 2015. And Steve asked me about some sort of a data set on that, so you will see also in Appendix 5, there's 58 teachers that are currently being paid at $40,000, and you'll see the various years of experience that they have, and that's a good demonstration of compression. And then the second data set is teachers in what I will call the 40 to 49,000 salary band. And if you look at all of that band, there's some compression that exists there. I suppose you could make an argument that there's compression throughout the schedule, but that's where the data set stops for this time. In a nutshell, salary schedule compression is complicated, it's multifaceted, there's a lot of different connections to it. We provided you with some information for policy implications, but I will move on in case because this is somewhat connected to teacher compensation plan as well. Point 4 is appendix number 6, which is the computer science position. And we're exploring some options to provide a computer science / coding class for 17-18. I think the way for us to get it started is probably in a non-traditional sense as opposed to a traditional course offering, because that would many times that's going to require us hiring a full-time position. We could do that via a shared service contract, perhaps with another district. We could do that via a flipped class. We could do it perhaps via an adjunct teaching position, which I know has some handbook implications. My point in raising it is we're committed to making it happen. We're just not committed to making it happen this year based on where we are money-wise, but we'd like to have that position for 17-18. So if you have strong feelings about how that position could look or how we get it started, I obviously would love to get it started with a big research and development push out of fund balance. Usually school boards don't like to do that, so I'll just toss that out, but there are other options that we can look at. I believe it's a gap in terms of one of our current offerings, but I think we could come up with a cost-effective way to make it happen in 17-18. Point number 5, Steve made contact with me maybe 2 weeks ago about our co-curricular committee, and just to dust everyone's memory off for probably, well, we were actually looking at a co-curricular. Andy was working on it before Gino joined the district, and we were taking a look at it in negotiations, and we know we have some disparity in our co-curricular schedule. Then Act 10 hit, and one thing led to another, and we just haven't really gotten back to it. But Mike and Gina are in the process of getting together a committee, and in terms of the committee, they're looking at having a few administrators, a couple of teachers and perhaps non-teachers, and it would include coaching and I'll say club advisory positions as well. And I think they're open to possibly putting a couple of community members on it too, which would be fine. I think it's always great when we cast the net a little wider and get some of our stakeholders involved in that process. You might think it's super aggressive that we could get this done in the fall of 2016, but Mike and Gina are optimistic on that. When we look at the total cost, we're spending in the neighborhood of $400,000. So simple flashcard math, 1% is $4,000, 2% is $8,000. It's probably a budget amount that's within our reach to make some changes with, especially given the fact that we haven't made changes for 5 years. Of course, in order to make some changes to that, Andy's going to need to bring us some additional funds, via all the budget reconciliation that he does that we won't get to until October. So Mike and Gina will not be overselling it with the committee and promising that there's something at the end of the rainbow, but hopefully we can get something done this year, and I think that budget cost is reasonable. And then the last point is appendix number 8, and there I've identified our July board meeting, which is July 11th. Sounds like a long ways from now, but goodness, it's going to be on top of us really quickly, and that means summer's half over, because the 4th of July is always my measure of summer. What we'll be doing in preparation for that is working with the principals, taking a look at open enrollment, taking a look at registrations that we've received through the year, because a great deal of our parents, if they move to the community new, they'll stop at the district office, and Katie will sift and winnow and try to balance those class sizes with assignments over the summer. So that's a really big date for us. Later on, under information, I'm going to provide you an update where we are open enrollment wise, because right now we just know applications. We don't know who's actually coming, and I think Gina may have included in this, or I may have copied to you somewhere or shared this information. We really don't know the open enrollment kids until the first day of September, and in this case, September 1, because we just don't know until they show up. Then the second part, October 24th, I think I gave you that date, is the final budget data. So, beginning in around the beginning of October, Andy will start to collect information from Department of Revenue, Department of Public Instruction, and we'll try to zero in on where we are budget-wise. Now, he has us trained very well. He has me exceptionally trained, where we usually have some funds. I don't think we're going to have, millions of dollars, but oftentimes there might be $100,000 or $125,000. So that's why we can speak with confidence that the co-curricular position or committee is probably something we can look at. Another item that I forgot to mention earlier, if there were one item that the administrative team is viewing as a high priority off that tier, what I'll call the Tier 2 budget list, which would be Appendix 3, is the ESL program and creating an ESL program at RCI, which eventually we grow to the middle school. I also think it's less risk because some positions we really can't add in October, but that's one that we could add in October and to get our program off the ground at RCI, and then continuing with an eye of growing it at the middle school and the high school. So I know we've tossed a lot of information out. Again, the recommendation is to approve the 9/12 staffing plan as attached, but we're happy to answer questions. Jim is here, and if you have specific questions about the high school staffing, he is happy to answer them as well. So with that, I'll stop.
Okay, I'd like to break now the board's consideration into two parts. One is, the first would be if anybody has any clarification questions or informational questions, and then once we get through those, then the second would be consideration of the recommendation of the administration on the merits and any substantive comment by the board. So first of all, I'll walk through with the board. Are there any clarification questions or informational questions that they need? Charlie? Nothing? Jeff?
Brian, you were just now mentioning that you could address the potential ESL position at RCI in the fall. Are there any positions on the would like to have list that if we're going to do them, we would need to make that decision now or in the next couple months?
I think the biggest pressure for us is the elementary class sizes, and looking at RCI and the middle school class sizes. The way things look right now, I think we're set at RCI in the middle school, but that July date is super important because once we release the number of sections, it's really virtually impossible to get parents to want to move their kids to a different school. So I don't, of course, we'd love all those things on Appendix 3, but the fact is we can't balance the budget by putting those things on Appendix 3, and our highest priority is the RCI bilingual position. So that's the one that I'd say we're feeling the most pressure with, but I think we can take care of that in October.
Anything else, Jeff? Barb?
I guess I just would like you to talk for a minute about the IT department staffing increase. And my concern with this is just that to what extent does our shortage here, how much is that affecting teachers in the classroom and the students to get on their equipment? Because it seems to me if we're not responding quickly, this has a lot of cascading effects.
I wish John was still here. John is brilliant, and you've probably read his report, which amplifies his brilliance. At some point, we're going to need to increase our IT staffing. There's just no question about it, the number of devices we have. I think the biggest priority, and I can remember 3 years ago when we really needed to reinvest in infrastructure. John does have a backlog. Well, like the backlog now is nothing compared to the backlog that we would have in August. I think he's convinced all of the administrators that we need some additional IT staffing. I also think that's a somewhat modular proposal, where once we see where everything falls, maybe in October we could do something with that. But ideally, I completely agree with John. We should have more IT staffing, but when we put IT staffing on the scale with class size, IT staffing is not as high as class size. So he's convinced us, and I'm sure he's written a very compelling narrative. I said no more than 3 paragraphs, and so John's report to me, which came about 15 minutes later, which meant he had it already written, was 4 pages long and just exceptionally well done. I think it just heightens the challenge that we have, and it also shows our staff, and I would assert that our staff utilizes technology for instructional purposes, and that's really, really critical.
Any other questions, Barb?
No.
Gwen?
Do we need administration, more administrators and stuff like that? We haven't spoken about that, and I don't know where that falls in with any of this. And it's just a matter of curiosity and has nothing besides that. Are we all set for administration for 2016, 2017?
Well, we have no recommendations to add any administrative positions, but if we had the opportunity, there's a few administrative positions that would be super helpful. And but the funding, quite frankly, isn't there, and it's a lower priority than class sizes. So we didn't really even engage in the conversation or writing a proposal for the board.
Thank you.
Anything else, Gwen?
No, that should do it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gwen. Dan?
Yeah, I just had one concern, and I want to bring it up during the next portion too, but I wanted to ask some questions about the second grade class sizes. And we talked about this and the difficulty in adding one teacher when there's 3 schools and people have already gone to one school, and it's hard to get people to move from one school to the other. But we've also got, if we add a teacher in the second grade, say at Netherwood, the year coming up, we're looking at 6 classes going into 4 teachers currently that we have in Netherwood. So for the first grade, we have 6 classes at Netherwood. In the second grade, we have 4. There's going to have to be some shifting of teachers and probably adding a teacher if I'm following the progression here. What are the administration's thoughts on adding a teacher this year, and how could that work in the second grade if we were going to do that?
If we were to add a second grade teacher, it would likely occur at Netherwood, because Netherwood has some available classroom space. We just sent a letter out to parents talking to them. I think it's a K through second grade letter. If there's any parents that are willing to have their children move to a different class, it's something that we've done routinely. We started doing that to see, is there any chance that we could get 10 or 15 second graders that would be willing to move? If we had 10 or 15 second graders that would be willing to move, and we put all of our new open enrollment students, assuming we get some in second grade, we could create another section and have a smaller and lower class sizes. This is just our internal way of thinking about it, and the way Katie, our registrar, thinks about it. The 5 sections that you see in first grade at Netherwood, really, they'll move to second grade next year. The 5 sections that you see at kindergarten, they'll move to first grade next year. Are you following that logic? And then in kindergarten, we'll make a guesstimate. I think it's pretty likely that we'll have a minimum of 4 sections, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if we didn't have a 5th section at Netherwood. It really shows the importance of, we want to hit that number when they're kindergartners. And when we miss that number as kindergartners, we'll end up, I think we had a lot of move-ins in second grade the last 2 years, and gosh, it's hard to predict exactly where we are. In second grade, our open enrollment applications we only have 4. So that's really small.
Brian, is the second grade one of those areas you're going to look hard and watch until July and see what the numbers are?
Yes, they are on the watch list, but there's no super solution because we haven't taken a position that we're going to force parents to move their kids to a different class. And maybe force is too strong of a word, but we do a lot of asking and we do a lot of requesting.
Dan, that get to your question on second? Probably talk about that when we get to the motion part.
Right. Just a follow-up. If the board decided tonight that we wanted another second grade teacher, what would the administration's action then be?
We would start with contacting, well, first, waiting to see the response we get from the letter we've already sent out, but it would be starting a more aggressive approach to try to balance those class sizes better. But,
That's all I have.
but we have a couple of competing interests with that.
Krista?
My one question is on the school counselor, the increase of .1 for RCI and OMS. Looking back to the Dane County Youth Assessment, and we're looking at mental health where, in 2012, it was 20% of our kids felt anxious and stressed, and now it's up to 31%. Feelings of depression was 13%, now it's 21%. It looks like a pretty minimal amount when you're looking at other positions, and we're asking for $5,000 for a .1. I guess my question is, what does that .1 mean in terms of student contact and ability to, meet with more students and maybe make an impact on that? Because the Dane County Youth Assessment numbers are pretty clear.
I'll just say it in terms of days. .1 is half a day. So, 3.5, 4 hours.
That's true, but the other piece of that is we actually have someone at .7 who's also covering a .2 for someone else. And then, so that allocation would be reshifted, so it actually would be an addition of .3, if you're following me, because that .2, which is already in the budget, would go to those schools. So it's more than just a .1 in terms of those 2 locations. So that's one part of the picture. If you want to know specific caseloads, then I'd have to look to Candace or Leslie to address that.
No, I just think that,
Right.
We're looking at these other positions of $30,000, $48,000, $60,000, and this one is a $5,000, but looking at the impact and the need is pretty important.
I have a question.
Yeah, follow-up question on that point, Barb, and then you have one on that. Yep.
It's my understanding that the school is going to have some outside counselors inside the schools starting this fall. Is that correct?
We've actually started that already. We have a partner who works with us that we can refer students to that takes Dean Insurance among other insurances. And we just started a new partnership with another agency that takes Unity insurance as well as other insurances. Most of our families have Dane or Unity, just like us, for obvious reasons in Dane County. So we feel that we at least have those two covered. The state law also changed. It used to be a pretty rigorous process to contract with a school to see students inside the school district. The law has changed on that, and so we are actually working through a process so that our students can have access to their own providers on school property where it's warranted, and working on right now just putting some safeguards in place, because obviously it's very important to us who comes into the buildings during the day. So there is, more opportunity for students to see mental health providers that are above the expertise of our school staff.
Charlie, did you have a follow-up on the school counselor issue?
I want to follow up on a concern that Barb had raised earlier with regard to John's report for tech. One of the things I noticed that really jumped out at me was that there apparently has been a dramatic increase in the number of cyber attacks that the district's been experiencing. And I'm wondering, the percentage increase has been substantial. I'm wondering if this is going to be a continuing area of growing concern, and if there are some other things we might do to help mitigate or address that.
Without John here, Andy or Brian, are you able to address that issue? Else we can follow up with Charlie, with John. Make him aware of the question and have John follow up with us. And here he comes. John, the question is, as you came in, Charlie wanted to know about the cyber attacks and the number that we've had and whether you anticipate that to continue.
Sorry I wasn't here. Had to pick up somebody from soccer practice. Yeah, unfortunately, well, cyber attacks, the biggest threat right now is ransomware, which has increased the whole world round quite a bit. It's not new, but there's been a huge growth in the past like 8 or 9 months. There was a botnet that operated in 2012, and then actually Interpol and the feds took it down in about 2014, and that put a damper on it for a while. But then in summer and fall of 2015, there were some new strains that came along. One of them infected us the first week of school, which was, hey, welcome back to school. So that was kind of in the explanatory notes that I put in along with a staffing proposal. So statistically, the growth has been in the hundreds and like multiple hundreds of percent. There's been, I think, like 6 or 7 new strains just in the past couple months of ransomware because it's very profitable. So there's a large Russian organized crime network called Drydex that's actually kind of taken over, and they're doing a lot more of the cyber attacks. And then there's a whole bunch of new variants that have come out. So every time there's a new variant, we have to take action, try to prevent against it, things like that. So there's no sign of it actually decreasing. In fact, Department of Homeland Security a couple weeks ago put out a notice joint with the Canadian government that basically warned everybody. And that doesn't happen too often that DHS steps in. So it's a growing threat. Mostly hit is healthcare and small businesses, but we have had attacks, whether it's been just a drive-by or a semi-random one. So I don't think they're targeting us necessarily, but we're certainly getting attacked. And I talked to a lot of the other Dane County school districts, and most of them have been hit as well. It's a new form of attack. So it's not like a traditional virus. It's not like there's not an antivirus software necessarily for it, although there's a couple in beta. It's just a very difficult thing because it has multiple different vectors, and there's a whole lot of people putting a lot of effort into it because the FBI actually told people you may as well just pay the ransom because there's no way to get the data back unless you have backups. And so people have. And so when you pay people who take ransoms, it encourages them to keep on doing it. And so a lot of people who are doing this for profit have decided to do it. So most of the information security community basically expects this to be to continue. And every month the warnings have just gotten more dire. So yeah, I fully expect it to continue and increase.
Follow-up questions on the psychologist issue. First, Gwen.
We have, the one thing that I'm concerned about is the AODA issue, and which is also highly connected to the mental health issue. And first of all, I want to thank Krista for bringing this up, and I appreciate that. And some of the AODA issues, some of the people may not actually have Unity or Dean, but Badger Care, et cetera. And I want to make sure that all of our students have access to the proper care, no matter what demographic they're from. So that would be across the board. And also the confidentiality and getting kids who have drug issues not in the courts, but in rehab, et cetera. And so, how are we addressing that? Do we have enough?
Gina, you have a
wait,
response.
can I finish, please?
Do you have a question of Gina or someone?
My question is, how will that be addressed? And how do we ensure, no pun intended, that people who have lower don't have access to the best insurance, have access to the help that they need?
Gina, you want to follow up briefly?
Sure, and thank you, Gwen. I should have clarified. So Badger Care is a contract with the state, where the state pays for the insurance, but they contract through Dean and Unity. So that's why we made sure that we have a Dean and now a Unity partner, because, and actually Unity worked very well with us to make an exception for our provider. So she's actually the only provider in Dane County that Badger Care Unity will pay for on school property, or in the city of, I guess, in the school district property. So really give Unity credit for doing that. So our families who have Badger Care have access to those same providers, just as I would having Unity private insurance or employer paid insurance. That's also why through the mental health task force, we're very grateful that the task force also has a pot of money that the board approved, where if there are parents that are struggling to pay for the insurance or pay the co-pays, that we do have money that is approved to pay for those as well. And we have a couple of those circumstances that we're currently doing. In addition, Mary Stella is one of our providers, and she has been very generous with her time and charging much reduced rates for students and families that maybe can't afford to pay a regular rate. So, it's really been a community project to make sure that our students have the resources that they need, and we're very grateful for that.
Thank you, Gina.
Thanks, Gina.
That makes it a lot clearer, and it also makes it across the board, and I appreciate that.
Brian, I have a question on Appendix 3, and that deals with the psychologist and the counselor issues. Those two come before page 10, which is monitor areas, and I was not sure whether your recommendation included spending $25,000 now, and the rest of them were monitors? Or were the psychologists and the counselor also in a monitoring area?
They were also in a monitor.
Okay. And would that still be the case that as we look at this in July and as we move through October, that we would have the wherewithal to fund those and locate, if we could fund them, we could locate folks, or are those positions where we would need to look now?
The counseling position is an on-staff, that's an on-staff member. The school psychologist increase, I'll just be super frank, it's going to be hard to find .2 school psychologists, because they're in a high demand area. I don't believe, I'm looking at Gina, I don't believe that we have any part-time school psychs anymore that are interested in adding time. I think we have a couple of part-time people, but they're not interested in adding time to their position.
Gina?
We might have one person, so it's possible, but the folks who are part-time either like being part-time or they have another part-time in a neighboring district. So it is possible that they, may want to give up that other part-time piece at a different district and be here.
And Brian, if I understood your recommendations, is that you are looking at the coding position, as the board has indicated last time, a real interest to proceed with that for next year, and you're looking at it in that context.
That's correct.
Okay, and we'll look to see how we fund that next year.
Yes.
Okay, that is all. Nina?
I just have one comment to address Ms. Flanagan's comment, which I appreciate you mentioning also. And I think that our school counselors are great. I've known a lot of them throughout my time in the Oregon School District, and they just are fabulous at their jobs. We're really lucky to have all of them. But if I could just ask, I don't know if you guys already do any training with regular educators, with teachers on mental health, and I know our teachers do a million things every day, and this is not part of their job description, to just like be checking in with kids. But I think for a lot of kids, especially once you get into high school, it could be a lot more meaningful and comfortable for them to have a teacher check in with them if they see like a change in their behavior or a change in their grades all of a sudden, like a kid who was really doing well is all of a sudden not doing well. I think for a lot of kids, it could end up being more meaningful to have the initial contact be with a teacher rather than a counselor. And I think, again, our counselors are awesome at their jobs, but some kids are just not comfortable going to the counselor and saying, hey, I've been feeling a little anxious lately, So I know that your in-service days and your professional development time is already very full. All the teachers in our school district have a lot of things on their plate already, but if you could ever consider taking time to do teacher training in the area of mental health, I think that could be really helpful for a lot of kids. So,
Thank you. Any other questions with respect to the staffing plan that's been presented by the district administration? Gwen?
I just want to say, Nina, that's a very good point, and I don't have a question, but I just want to share my experience has been is that.
Well, we're trying to. Gwen,
excuse me, Steve.
the
I want
point
to
is
address.
right-
I want to address what Nina has said, and I think that she deserves that respect. And one of the things with teachers is that it's pretty much standard procedure, but I think refresher courses are very good, and thank you for bringing that up.
Does anybody else have any questions or clarifications of the administration at this point? Okay, now let's move to discussion of the recommendation. The board's recommendation, or the administration's recommendation, is to approve the staffing plan as it is right now, with the consideration in July of student enrollment at that point in time and a reassessment of the budget. Is anybody at this point willing to make a motion to approve that recommendation? Moves to approve the administration's recommendation. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Barb seconds. Okay, now it's time for discussion of the recommendation and the items on the table. And I'll start over there, Krista.
I guess back to my original question in terms of the $5,000 ad for the school counselor. Andy, maybe this is a question for you in terms of that small of an amount compared to the other bigger ticket items. What kind of opportunity do we have to do that sooner rather than later?
I think the opportunity is there. I try to let the administrative team come up with the recommendations rather than me moving forward with something. So I'd want the administrative team to, I guess, consider that.
And I guess, back to Gina, is that, is there any sort of staff implication in terms of what you talked about with the .2 that's being taken? I mean, is there a change that we would see that has any implications about doing that sooner rather than later?
I mean, we would certainly post that and work through the process. I don't know if I see as long as an internal person was interested in that, you know, obviously the sooner people know for next year, the better. So you're never going to hear me say it's okay to wait to post something. But obviously some are more urgent than others. So I think if we could get an idea about that before the end of school year, that would be ideal. But people also understand our budget realities.
Right now, we've got two budget scenarios. One is at 900,000 for additional revenue for us, and one is at 1 million. I think the 900 is where Andy is currently at in terms of the budget. So even with that, we're facing a $15,000 deficit, but that's in July. We would have a better idea where we go with that. And we can approve items in addition to the staffing plan, but that takes us into deficit city as we move there. Anything else, Krista, or comments or points, Dan?
Thank you. I just wanted to make a comment first on moving into deficit. I don't think that's what we're talking about if we approve other positions here. There is some wiggle room, and unfortunately, I think it would affect raises. But we're not going to go into deficit by creating extra positions right now. So I would oppose the motion at this time because I would like to see another teacher in the second grade. I think it's very important. Our school board has developed a policy, and we have created maximums that we would like to see as class sizes. And in the second grade, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's 21. It could be 22, but I think it's 21 that the school board has set as our target for a maximum. And unfortunately, because of budgets, it's become now a target instead of a maximum. Even if we did add one teacher in the second grade, we'd still have an average of over 21 students per classroom. We'd have 21.54 students per classroom in the second grade, according to the numbers that we have here on appendix number 2. I would like to see us add a teacher. We'd let the administration figure out where that teacher's going to go and how to fill up that classroom. In the worst case scenario, if Netherwood got a new class, they would have, and that no one moved into it besides the Netherwood people, they'd still have 19 kids per class, or 18.6 kids per classroom. I think that that could be fixed with move-ins, people who open enroll in, and I think that if it was put out to other schools or the parents of kids at other schools, some might want to move in order to have their child in a smaller class. But I realize there's problems logistically getting all the schools equal in the class size, and it looks like that's what we have right now. But unfortunately, they're all equal in being over our maximum target. And that's just, I don't like to see that. So that's really the only thing that I want to push in this discussion, is that I really like to see another second grade teacher be approved with this plan.
Anything else, Dan? Thank you. And you're right, we're not tonight voting on what salaries or wage increases are, or the budget. So any decision we would make on staffing obviously has impact on other areas of the budget, and that would be one item that would be flexible. So Gwen, anything, discussion regarding the motion on the table to approve the plan?
So how does that work? I like what Dan said about having, can we include that in our vote tonight, or do we have to wait?
It's certainly subject to a motion. It's a staffing plan, and if there were 4 people who voted for adding another section at second grade, that would be part of the staffing plan that obviously has budget impact. And I'll let Dr. Bustler discuss more if you want on what the potential impact would be if that is the decision that's made by the board this night.
I would welcome an additional second grade class. I'm never going to stand in the way of our ability to lower class sizes. I will say historically, the board has viewed, and I don't want to nuance words, the K through third grade has been at 22. But that's been the guideline as opposed to a hard and fast maximum. I will say it's going to be a little complicated if and when there's calls from Brooklyn parents or Prairie View parents about why don't we do it at all three schools. I'm just going to say that's a little complicated because I don't think we have the funds where we sit today to say we could add a section at Brooklyn, Netherwood, and Prairie View, and I'm not even sure where we'd be space-wise. I think Andy and the principals would have to take a look at that. But our second grade class sizes they're high. Now, again, it's all a function of what you're used to. I worked in communities where those numbers would be 25 and 26. That's not the community standard in Oregon. And I'm not advocating going to 25 or 26, but it just points to how challenging identifying the right class size is.
Anything else, Gwen? Did that answer your question then on that? Okay. Barb, any regarding the motion that's on the table?
I guess any further discussion about adding a second grade, another second grade teacher needs to be discussed in the context of the other priorities that have been identified, because it's going to be harder to do some of those things. And one of them, of course, is the bilingual position, and there's sort of an equity issue here that we need to consider. And then again, the IT issue. John's report notes that there's a loss of instructional time dealing with these issues, and that's affecting all of our classrooms potentially. So it's not easy.
Any other points on the recommendation or the priorities that you want to discuss? Okay, Jeff? Yeah, then.
A quick question. What level of support do we have in the way of teacher aides and so on for second grade classes? That can have some impact in terms of lessening the effect of having a little bit larger class size if there is actually more support there for teacher aides.
Usually what the principals do is they work with Gina and Andy, and every year there's an allocation of the number of hours. So I don't want to give board members the idea that we have a particular educational assistant assigned to a particular classroom. We actually have an allocation of hours, and Andy and Gina, you're welcome to correct me on this, but those allocation of hours go to the people with the largest class sizes first.
We also have made modifications and added hours to those people when the class sizes have exceeded the guidelines. That's a typical reaction that we make if we go over. I don't, off the top of my head, know how many that is, but we work with the principals to identify what will work within their building, and then we allocate that.
Charlie, any other points on?
Just a quick thought. I think it would be really valuable for the board to hear from some of the teachers who are in this situation in terms of how the increased class size is affecting their ability to do their job a little bit. I think this is something we ought to consider. I'm certainly inclined to support adding an additional teacher at second grade if we can do that. What I guess question to Gina would be, what sort of time constraints are we under in terms of making that decision?
So You know, in terms of time constraints, obviously, well, not obviously, the earlier you post, the better, usually the better our candidate pool is. Now, we have gotten lucky the past few years where people have moved unexpectedly, and we've hired some, you know, fantastic teachers in April, and we've hired fantastic teachers in August. But generally, you know, the earlier we post, the larger the pools are. So, but, you know, we need to make a good decision in terms of how to allocate the budget dollars that we have. So I would like you to take the time you need to make the best decision possible. I don't know if Dr. Bessler wants to add anything to that.
The door is closed after the July 11th meeting, but the door's open between now and July 11th.
Charlie, any other point on that, Jeff?
As I said 2 weeks ago, I found some of the rationale for the positions on the wish list to be pretty compelling. And I'm looking at the budget projections on page 7, Appendix 1. So, Andy, if you want to shoot me, you can shoot me. Correct me if I get anything wrong, but looking at fund balance over the last 3 or 4 years, and maybe this is a bad way to look at it, but I look at the low point during the year, which is November or December, and it's been creeping up slowly. You know, not a lot, but a little bit. And I know it's your job to keep the projections conservative so that we don't shoot ourselves in the foot, but I just want people to consider maybe option 2 in the budget projection is doable, and maybe we have $85K that we could use for some of these positions that aren't currently in the recommendation.
Just more of a procedural caution. If that is our intent, we get into that policy that we have, which requires a supermajority of board members to approve that. So other than that, that's the only caution that I have with that. I will share with you that I tried intentionally to be a little bit more aggressive than I have in the last couple of years with my revenue projection. $900,000.
I'm wearing you down, right?
Yes, you're trying to wear me down, but I'm just trying to remind people again that I'm trying to put the money on the front end so that we can make decisions proactively. Now, how good I'm at that, you know, I try, but then I don't have a crystal ball. So, I'm fine with $100,000 of fund balance is not a big worry that I have, other than the next year it kind of becomes $200,000 and it kind of starts to snowball. But as long as you go into it with, we must have a timer on this thing. As long as we go into it with the eyes wide open, we're going to be all right. Yeah, I'm looking for, you're pushing the button. I didn't know this thing had a timer function, so we'll have to research that.
Jeff, anything more to your question? Okay. Dan?
At this time, I'd like to move to amend the motion that's on the table to include one more position in the second grade.
A second to that motion?
I second.
Okay. Discussion. Krista?
While I support lower class sizes, I'm wondering if there is an interim step to that. You know, listening to what Brian said in terms of the letter going out, and Dan, your proposal of potentially just adding that to Netherwood could create more issues than it solves. And so I guess what I'm wondering is if there's an interim step of potentially moving that to the top of the monitor list and seeing how this letter goes, or getting a little bit more engaged in that conversation with parents. I would hate to see, while I would love to see lower class sizes, I would hate to see us as a district forcing or getting into the method of moving second graders from a school that they've been in the last 2 years so they can have a lower class size. That would be one of my concerns. So I'm just wondering if there's a potential friendly amendment to that.
Any other discussion regarding the motion to amend that's on the table? Anybody else? Dan?
I just wanted to address Krista's suggestion that it might create more problems than it solves. I don't think anybody has said that it wouldn't create a couple of administrative issues, but I don't think anybody, least of all the administration, has said that it creates any problems that wouldn't be better served by having another teacher. Our superintendent has said clearly that he'd love to have another second grade teacher. I think even if the teacher was put in just one school, no one else moved from another school, we're still in a better position. I think if we give families the option, if they want to move, I'm sure from what I've heard that the administration would not force any kids to move from one school to another school that didn't want to. And we have a very creative administrative team that I think could well use this position. And I just really would like to see us get the primary school numbers down in the second grade, because they actually look very good otherwise.
Any other comments or discussion? Charlie?
I'm just wondering if there are any factors that we need to consider that are likely to change between now and the July 11th date that we've got sort of a window.
I don't think there's a lot of factors that change. The one thing we know, the closer we get to September, the easier it is to project what we believe the enrollment to be. We'll know more families that have moved into the community, but our last shot has always been in July, when we take a look and put together our best estimate that we know of. And since we're really only 2 months out, we'll have our final kindergarten enrollment. We'll also be 2 months down the road in terms of enrollments or move-ins, but I don't see another factor that's going to change significantly.
Do you
between now and
anticipate
then.
hearing back from parents on the letters that were sent out?
Yes. Yeah, we'll have information back from our resident parents. We'll also have some open enrollment information back too.
Nina, did you have a comment on this? Okay, Jeff? Anybody? Gwen?
We can always budget it tonight, and if we don't need that, then we have it, then we don't have to use that, correct?
Well, if you budget tonight, you're going to post it to fill it, and then you don't go back.
I understand that, but what I'm saying is that I think, statistically, class sizes, smaller class sizes provides a better learning experience. I mean, and that's sort of a tried and true data situation, and so that's why I'm supporting it. And if we do post it and we do hire it, and, perhaps second graders will then enjoy across the boards smaller classes too. So I think we need to cover our bases here and make sure that our second graders have the attention that they need, and it's a very important grade level.
Brian?
I just want to make sure that we have good role clarity. If the board approves a motion to add a second grade position, we're going to post it and fill it. Unless the board approves a motion that says, don't fill it until July 11th and come back and check with us, then we would do all the background planning for where we'd put the class, but we would not post it and or interview for the position.
So then would we have a better knowledge of how many kids would be in second grade then?
On July 11th?
By July 11th, yes. Or are we still dealing with the same numbers as now?
Well, we'll be 2 months down the road in terms of move-ins. So we'll have a better sense of that. We will have the open enrollment parents have to contact us after we say there's a slot available. And I'm looking at Janie. I don't remember the date, but I believe they get back to us. It's June something. I don't think it's later than June 15th. So we would have that piece of data, which is helpful. Although I can look at the applications and already tell you that there's only 4 applications in for second grade.
Here's where I'm at with regard to the second grade motion. I was the one who requested the breakdown of the class sizes specifically to try to find out if we have any issues like this, and one of the areas that I noticed was second grade, because we are bumping up at all 3 schools. Unfortunately, the bump up is equalized across the board, which creates some significant logistic issues and some significant equity issues if we decide to go with one school, and that concerns me. I think my preferred route would be is to monitor this closely. Brian suggested one role would be to approve it tonight and then hold posting. I guess my preference would be to direct the administration to provide us with pros and cons of adding another position at second grade, so that we know fully the impact that would cause, both in terms of moving kids, classroom availability, equity issues between the schools, so that we can fully assess that as a board. And at the same time, we would be monitoring the number of students who have indicated an interest of coming to Oregon to see if that stays the same. We'd have that pool of information, and that would allow us to have an informed decision about second grade in that context, without losing anything other than a couple months of potential recruiting, which we weren't going to do anyway with this. So I guess I would oppose the motion in terms of doing it now, but in terms of my interest level, that's very high in terms of as we proceed with budgeting for the next school year. Gwen?
So Dan, would that be a fair adjustment to your motion, to say yes and wait for posting until July?
That sounds like if the administration would be comfortable with that, I would like to see us budget it. And if the administration would rather wait until closer to July 11th to decide whether they want to post it or they want to ask us to remove the position at that time, I would be more comfortable, though, having the position there, and so that we've got the money allocated and we're able to post it on a moment's notice if the administration decides that we need it.
Any other questions on that? My comment on that is my preference is, before we jump and make a decision on that, is that we understand fully the ramifications of doing that. By waiting, we're not indicating any preference not to do that. In fact, as I indicated, I think it's a priority to get that addressed if we can do it equitably and within the budget. So I would prefer to wait as opposed to approve tonight. Krista?
Would parliamentary procedure on that be then, we would need to vote on Dan's motion, and then if that motion failed, we would need a new motion stating, okay, thank you.
That would be the way. Any further discussion on Dan's motion to amend? Okay, the motion on the table, right, we have 2 motions on the table. One is to approve the administrative recommendation, but the one that takes precedent is Dan's motion to amend the administration recommendation by adding a second grade position. Ms. Jonan?
And hold the posting until July?
Not what I understood the motion to be.
We can amend the motion to say that.
We could
though.
have a friendly amendment to the motion, but it'd have to be accepted by Dan and by whoever seconded that. Okay. Right now, the motion is to add the position and to fill it now and post it now. And that has a second from Ms. Mateson. Ms. Jonan?
So I just want to be upfront about this. If Dan would consider this a friendly amendment by someone, is that we may, if you approve the position and we fill it, we also may need to add a small amount of additional time for like music, art, world language, or physical education to balance out the schedule. So if you remember when we added a position earlier in the month, we had to add, 0.2 in each of those at Netherwood to balance out the schedule. So I just want to be upfront about that. You don't need to address it tonight, but I just feel like I need to share that with you because I don't know, it depends where that position would go and what the schedule looks like.
And that is my concern with approving that position tonight, is because we don't know all the ramifications. And I think it's worthy of our focus as a priority to consider, but I think before we vote on it, we really need to know the true implications of adding that position. Ms. Feeney, Barb.
I just want to comment that I would prefer that we hold this discussion till July because I feel like this proposed position needs to be considered along with the other things that have been listed as a priority, because approving that second grade position means some of the things on this priority list will fall off. It just will happen because we aren't going to have enough money. So I would prefer that we have a discussion in July when we have a little bit more number, a little bit better numbers, and then look at it in the context of the other positions that are on our wish list.
Any further discussion on the motion to amend?
I would like to suggest a friendly motion to include a second grade teacher and post it in July when we have more information.
Dan, would you accept that as a friendly amendment?
Yes.
So the motion before the board is to approve the another second grade position, but withhold authorization for posting it until July. Is that correct? Gwen, is that your intent?
Yes.
Dan? Yes. Okay, any discussion on that? Charlie?
On giving it some reflection, I guess I would like to see us fill that position, but I think I would like to be able to make that decision in the context of a conversation around some of the issues that you've raised, Steve, and also with a little bit more information perhaps in terms of where we're at toward the end of June or first part of July. So I think this is a very important issue, deserves very thoughtful consideration, a very important consideration, but I guess I would feel more comfortable voting in the affirmative on this if I had a little more information about what the impact is going to be.
Any final thoughts before I have Janie call the roll? Okay. Janie, the motion on the table is to amend the administrative recommendation to add another second grade position, but to withhold authorization for posting that position until the first meeting of the board in July. Would you call the vote?
Mr. Kraus? Yes. Ms. Mateson?
Yes.
Ms. Feeney? No. Mr. Uphoff? Ms. Flanagan? Yes. Mr. Raymond? No. Mr. Zock?
No. Motion to amend fails, which leaves on the table the motion to approve the administrative recommendation. Is there any further discussion on that? Charlie?
Just a comment or observation, I think this issue of adding a teacher at the second grade level is something we're going to have to revisit. I'm looking forward to that conversation.
And I will work with Brian. I got the clear intent of the board that they want to take some further look at this, and it's not a issue that's dead with the vote at this point in time. And I would ask that the administration provide the board with information regarding the implications of adding a second position, how that would work in terms of location, what it would mean for any additional cost if we do that. And as we approach the July meeting, we would have that information for the board for further conversation. Any other conversation regarding the motion on the table? I have two comments to make. One is we have the co-curricular issue out there, and those will be costs in this budget to consider. So as we move forward with budgeting, that has to be considered, because that is going to be a 16-17 cost. The second point is one that concerns me significantly, and it ties in somewhat with the teacher compensation plan that we're going to hear about in a little bit, but that is the compression that is occurring amongst our teaching staff, and it's significant, and we need to address it because we have a significant number of teachers between 4 and 9 years of experience, or 6 years of experience, that are making the same as new teachers coming into the district, and that is causing, I think, some morale problems. And I would rather address some or all of that in the context of an operating budget and explore that, but I don't think that that's appropriate in terms of the staffing plan, but is more a focus of the teacher compensation discussion as well as the ongoing budget, and to see how we might be able to fund that. You know, if we provided everybody who, the 104 who are in that compression area, a 2% raise, that costs us $208,000, and that alleviates some of the compression that's occurring. It's not a full solution, but again, we need to have that conversation, and that's not a now conversation, but I want to put it on the board's radar that it is an issue with current staff, and it's a significant issue with current staff, and we need to address it as a priority, and that means if we're talking about spending in other areas, it affords us limited opportunity to do it there. So, any other comments? All right, the motion on the table is to approve the administration recommendation and to hold in abeyance the additional staffing requests until the July meeting. Is that correct, Janie? Okay, and who made that motion?
Mr. Uphoff moved and Ms. Feeney seconded.
Okay.
Could you repeat that, please?
You need to indicate whether I have this correctly. It is to approve the administration recommendation for staffing, which would hold in abeyance the additional requests as noted in the information before us until the July meeting.
So there is an opportunity to get a second grade teacher with that approval?
Correct. And as I had indicated, that I have asked Brian to put together further information for our consideration and review for that very purpose.
Okay, that clarifies. So as long as we still have the opportunity to have an additional second grade teacher.
To take the roll.
Mr. Uphoff? Ms. Feeney? Ms. Flanagan? Mr. Raymond? Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Zock?
Yes. Motion is approved unanimously. Thanks, everyone, for a really good discussion, and Brian and the administrative team, we look forward to continuing information from you regarding the options as we move forward in our budget consideration. The next item on our agenda is the approval of a plan to relocate Oasis to the Oregon High School in 2017, 2018, and this is an action item that follows our discussion of last time, and Brian, a brief introduction to this.
Tonight, we're seeking your approval of the recommendation to approve the OASIS plan, which is to relocate OASIS to the high school in the 2017-18 school year, or I will just add, perhaps earlier, if we're into that facility, let's say in February, and we don't have other construction-related concerns in that northeast quadrant, I would leave it up to the OASIS staff, the students, and Mr. Pliner to determine if we could move during the year. I've seen some moves during the year, and it's kind of a cool way for kids to be part of a new transition into a facility space. Just a super quick reminder, on April 25th, we shared with you several facility layout sketches. I will say, just as my colleagues have shared, the OASIS staff has been deeply involved in planning this space. I think we're in iteration perhaps number 4 right now. I've asked Leslie, Andy, and Jim to just refresh your memory and show you the building layout, which I would say is in the near final phase, and then we seek your approval of this plan. So I'll turn it over to Leslie, Andy, and Jim.
As you can read in the board packet, I think this is the 4th version of the OASIS design, because the first one was just a completely cold run by the architects, and then after that there were different iterations based on input from the teachers. So as you can see, all of the things that they told us were very important to the learning needs of the students are included in this design, which made the teachers feel very positive about the entire OASIS move. Not only do we have small group instructional areas, we have a place specifically designed for art and science, so you know that there are cabinets and a sink. There are comfortable collaboration spaces, computer spaces, a meeting room for when families come in to meet with the teachers, and really important to the group was a community gathering space and a kitchen, because a large part of their curriculum has to do with the idea of creating this family experience and then using lots of other subject areas, bringing it in, such as cooking, such as science. So that was something that was really important to them. And I think this design reflects that. And we're just excited that we have come this far and that everybody involved in the process feels really positive. And then I think we will have a really fine facility for our OASIS students.
Any questions or clarifications of the administration team? Charlie?
Leslie, I'm wondering, looking at the design layouts here, is there a way to access the OASIS space from the high school directly?
No, they do. They purposely wanted it detached from the school.
There you go. You can see Andy's pointing it out there. There is, but that would be a space where the administrators could go in, but it wouldn't be a space where all other students were able to access OASIS.
For my question is, I believe in some cases some of the OASIS students have actually participated in or accessed classes within the high school as well, and I'm just thinking that's an important
There is. There's easy access for our OASIS students to get into the high school. It just will require a key for the high school people to get into OASIS.
And just to clarify, what you're looking for, Brian, is not an approval of design, but simply approval from the board to locate the OASIS facility on the school grounds with new construction.
Yes, that's correct. Just like the other designs that we've developed, they're really a faculty-based design out of our design team process. We modified it a little bit, and instead of Jim bringing his usual design team at the high school, we just totally focused it on OASIS because we want those staff members that are most affected and are going to live in that space to design it. And that's what we have, but we feel like we need your approval, and we wanted to come back and just clarify so that we're all on the same page.
To clarify, you're not seeking to have the board modify or to change any of the programming with respect to OASIS, and that would remain the subject of how we've structured OASIS in the past.
Yes, absolutely. I would assert, and I think my colleagues would assert, that this needs to be a faculty-led process, and that's what's brought us to iteration number 4.
Wanted to address Gwen's point that, right now, OASIS has autonomy in some sense of that word, and the intent of this is not to impact how those decisions are made in terms of how OASIS is run, but that's determined by the folks at OASIS and administration.
That's correct.
Okay. So this is solely a geographic decision in terms of location?
Yes, there's
Okay.
no recommendation for changes in programming.
Okay. Make sure everybody was clear. Gwen?
First of all, I'm really glad that this is happening. One of the questions that I have, and please forgive me for asking this, why did it take so long? Other than the referendum, I mean, with all of the troubles that have been experienced historically, we finally, and I understand the bidding process, but philosophically, I don't know why this didn't happen sooner. And a lot of stress and contention could have been avoided if there had been real concerns earlier, or would have been addressed earlier. And I know that when we initially fought for the referendum, OASIS was considered to bring it back closer to the high school, but attach it to a maintenance garage. And I did not vote for that because it seemed rather kind of the same issue, just moving it. And I have to say that the footprint for the new OASIS attached to the high school is beautiful. And I just wish it happened like 4 or 5 years earlier. But, if wishes were, whatever that.
Gwen, I take that as a motion to approve?
I approve of it, yeah. I just, when I look back at the history of OASIS,
Yeah.
it just,
And
there was a lot of struggle that in reflection, I wish was handled differently.
And in a moving forward mode, are you moving to approve the administration recommendation?
Yes.
Is there a second to that? Is there any further discussion? Dan?
I think this is a wonderful plan for OASIS. We haven't talked really about what the impact is on the rest of the referendum. I know there were parts of the referendum that went over budget, some of the earlier parts that we did the construction on, and some that's continuing. This is adding basically square feet, and that's how we budget for these things. So I know that even though this is important, we need to talk about where this money would go if we were not creating this space for Oasis, because there are other parts of the referendum. Perhaps, is it just only being taken from the high school projects? Is the money for Oasis being taken from all of the schools? Is it being taken only from the schools that haven't finished their construction? Where is the money coming from, and what are we losing? Because we do lose in some area when we add in another area. It's not coming from the ground for us. So could you talk about that, please?
Brian, could you address where the funding of this comes from, or Andy?
I'll get started and Andy can correct me. You can always tell by the look on his face if I'm going in the right direction.
Horrible poker player.
One thing we did back in December of 2014 when we met with the design committees is we tried to make it clear that every building, every project has a budget. And every building, every project's budget needs to be reasonably close within budget. We have now finished virtually everything at Brooklyn. We still have a couple of items to finish up this summer, but we have bid prices on everything at Brooklyn. And while we were a little over at Brooklyn, we've balanced everything out. We are balanced out at Netherwood. We're balanced out at Prairie View. And when we looked at the high school budget, we had the bids came in very favorably. And what our design team, you're looking at the three design team co-chairs, what they did is they went back to the high school staff and we added some items back in that were sort of on the fence or were alternates. So by adding this $700,000 or roughly $700,000 at the high school, it's going to fit within the budget allocation that we have for the high school. It's not taking away from a project at any other school. It fits within that budget allocation at the high school. And we feel really fortunate to have listened to the advice of Matt Wolford and Findorf, because we delayed the bidding. At one point, we were thinking of bidding in November of 2015, and their recommendation to us was bid later. And we actually bid at the end of January. I think we closed our bids the beginning of February, maybe second week in February. And we're in a good situation that we can make this investment and be within our budget at the high school.
Gwen?
Did I say anything, Andy, that makes you nervous?
Absolutely not.
And Andy, correct me if I'm wrong, I think in the long term, this is going to be extremely financially beneficial. It's going back to the district and not other people. And I think that it's money well spent. And again, thank you.
Dan, did that answer your question?
Can I follow up?
Sure.
So if we weren't doing this, what would we be doing with the savings? And just something that you brought up now that created a question in my mind. You said we went over budget at Brooklyn, but it balanced out. And how did that happen?
We balanced it out because we changed some of our square footage in some other areas at Brooklyn in terms of, I'll say the library area. And we've also got our second set of bids for the summer work that's being done at Brooklyn. We did add like 3,000 square feet at Brooklyn when we started the project, roughly, to the cafeteria.
Yeah, it was definitely larger than it was originally thought to be. I don't remember the number off the top of my head.
So we had to raise the Brooklyn budget, but one of the areas that we had was a generous contingency. And we had a project contingency identified at every school. We took some project contingency monies and balanced out Brooklyn. Still, in today's budget, we have about $800,000 that is uncommitted. It's sort of like fund balance on the project. And I almost hate to say that, because the minute I say that, we will hit some sinkhole at the high school, and we hit a sinkhole at Prairie View, and it cost us $50,000 one.
I do have a $45,000 thing that hit me this afternoon. So.
So,
So we have some
with the high
contingency
school,
monies.
where would that money go if it wasn't going towards this?
We could use it on any other project at the high school. We could also, any funds that Andy does not spend in that approved $54.6 million can be used to repay long-term debt. It can't be transferred out to another fund. It can only be used on what I'll call the general purpose of what it was approved for, or you could use that $700,000, I'm not recommending this, to lower long-term debt when the project's complete.
So specifically, we haven't chosen any less expensive flooring, or chosen not to do any particular windows, or lessen the square footage of any other part of this project, right?
I guess the question depends a little bit on timing. When the bids were over before, when we designed some things, we were a little bit more cautious with things. We tried to build options so that we had flexibility. If the bids came in good, we could do those options. And so that's what we've been doing. So, for instance, I'll give you a for instance. There's a hallway at the middle school that goes by orchestra and band and choir, and then it goes by the science classrooms too. That was a little bit narrower than we would like. So we actually made that hallway larger once the bids came in better, so that it's a little bit more friendly to being able to get kids around. So I don't want to say that absolutely no, we didn't make something smaller. Anytime that we did, we tried to revisit those things when the bids came back in and make sure that we were able to provide those things. But the bids came in really great because of what Dr. Bussler said. Us waiting that extra year was significantly helpful to everything.
Great, I'm happy to hear that we're not cutting anything, and we seem to be getting extra space and a good solution for the Oasis kids.
Yep. And I'll also mention, just so you know, we have a ticking time clock on this money too. The money has to be spent by March of 2018. So we're less than 2 years away from having spent that money, one way or another, either to put it back into debt service or to have it spent.
Okay, the motion on the table by Gwen and seconded by Charlie was to approve locating Oasis at the high school as part of new construction. Is there any more discussion on that? Could you take the roll, Janie?
Ms. Maidson?
Yes.
Mr. Uphoff? Ms. Feeney?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan? Mr. Raymond? Mr. Kraus? Mr. Zock?
Yes. Gwen?
And the only other thing I want to say is I feel good about this, so thank you.
And are you calling Bray Architect right now, Brian? to let him know to finalize the design? Terrific, thanks.
I was
everyone.
sending Matt a text.
Yeah, that's a terrific use of the good bids that we got. Discussion items now, moving on. Committee reports, Vision Steering Committee. We met 2 weeks ago, this Wednesday, and discussed the position paper that the district is working on, and we had a great discussion for an hour. The process right now is that Krista's working on section 1 and doing the revisions and edits in the preamble that included some ideas from Jeff in terms of our vision, and then Barb and Jeff are taking a crack at section 2 based upon dialogue from the committee, and then when we get that unified group together, Gwen's going to take a cut at it from her end, and then we're going to bring it back to the committee and see where we're at. So we're really making great progress. We hope to have something to you in June to look at. So that's the report. And we're going to talk more about committees on Thursday. Teacher Compensation Committee report, and this is a report, and as I understand it, submission to the board of the committee's final recommendations. Is that correct, Gina? And at the beginning of the report, I'd just like to thank on behalf of the board and the district, the members of the committee who have spent the last 3 years really looking hard at this issue in thoughtful consideration. That would be Colleen Schell, Colleen Christensen, Dave Ebert, John Fishwald, Gina, Andy, Leslie, and Charlie. It is a big assignment, and we greatly appreciate all the time that you've put into that. It's a very significant issue. So Gina, proceed. The way we're going to handle this is Gina's going to give us a brief overview of this. Then there will be an opportunity for board members to ask any clarifying questions or seek information about this. We're not going to talk about substance and how we feel about any particular item tonight, because that will be subject of our board meeting in 2 weeks, where we work through exercises with the board to start evaluating the plan and determine how we're going to proceed. So Gina, phase one of tonight is introduction from you on behalf of the committee.
Okay, thank you, Steve. I just wanted to stress 2 points for you just to keep in mind tonight, and I appreciate your kind words, Steve. Unfortunately, Colleen Schell was here, but she had to go, and there's Jen Fishwald is at the middle school concert. Dave Ebert had another appointment for his daughter, and Colleen Christian had family obligations. So you see only me here tonight, but I really want to stress that this was a 3-year team effort. So what is in your materials? It's not, if I sat down by myself and crafted a plan, it wouldn't be this. If any of the teachers individually sat down and crafted a plan, it wouldn't be this. This was really a collaborative 3-year effort involving all stakeholders, community, parents, teachers, administrators, and the board. So I just want to keep that in mind that, as any collaboration, that it's not that it can't be better, it always can be better, but it's a collaborative effort. Definitely. And as I remind people every time I speak, that when we started this project, I was not pregnant, and my daughter's almost 2.5. So that's always a very visual reminder to me of how long I've been living with this issue. So please feel free to ask clarifying questions, because I've been living with this a long time. So sometimes I don't explain things as well as I should. And with that, you have in your materials the plan, and I know we've talked about it before. But Ms. Flanagan was not on the board, although she and I have talked individually about this. So I'm gonna go rather quickly through it to give you the time to ask the questions that you need. In terms of the model, the last year we really tried to look at the vision work that the board was doing to help us guide our decision making. So, and I really have to thank Dr. Bergson for this, because she was really, really disciplined about always bringing us back to the vision when we were struggling with difficult issues. So we kept that present in our meetings. We also kept present our pillars of success, and we set these probably our first or second meeting to judge whether or not we thought we had a successful plan. So we use these pillars to guide us, and you'll hear me talk about those every time we present as well. So I just wanted them up there as a reminder. Again, it was a team effort. We really looked at, I think if you look at what are the 3 major components of our plan. The first component is because the charge from the board was to retain, develop, and recruit fantastic teachers. So in looking at that, we really based that on 3 things. One is to reward and recognize people for their years of service to our district. The second was to reward and recognize teachers for excellent performance. And the third, because we stress lifelong learning in Oregon, and that professional development research shows leads to better student achievement, that we would reward and recognize completion of a professional development learning sequence. So that's really the foundation of our plan. In terms of the range, our range, we looked at, what do we have now that we really value? And what we heard from staff is that we really value recognition for our master's degree. It's a significant amount of time and investment from a teacher's perspective, and the teachers feel that it does improve their practice in the classroom. So we kept that. What we do now is we do a $4,000 salary increase for a teacher if they return to our district the year after they obtain their master's degree. So for example, if I completed my master's degree now, I would see that salary increase on the next year's contract. So we kept that in place. And then looking at the range, we start at $40,500, so $500 higher than we are this school year. So recognizing our need to stay competitive within the market. And then so beginning educator is what we would call a level. And then you'll see like 5 steps, or what we call it, within that level. So there's a 2% increase within each step of the level. And we looked at our our history of salary increases the last 5 years, and it's about a 2%, give or take. So we kept that 2% trend. And then once you go into the professional level A, then there's a $5,000 difference between level A1 and level B1. So, and that's to recognize a teacher jumps levels by a successful evaluation and completing a professional development sequence. And you have the full chart in your packet, we just couldn't capture it on the screen. The professional learning sequences, this is really Dr. Bergstrom's. She can speak more about this, but we have one that we developed for personalized learning, and this is really to give the teachers a path to proficiency. And what we've heard is that teachers like the idea of knowing what to do to meet our expectations in different initiatives. So if this plan were to if the plan were to pass, we would look at creating other sequences that the district would highly recommend that teachers pursue. But to keep along with personalized learning, we would look to the teachers themselves to develop them as well. And those would have to be administrator approved to make sure they're tying into our goals. But we wanted to give the teachers the autonomy to do that as well. Successful performance, so what does that look like? We really think of it as a model of proficiency, that in order to move through the levels, that you would have to have a successful evaluation. And what that would mean is maximizing student results through proficiency across the 4 evaluative domains of planning and preparation, the school environment, instruction, and professional responsibilities. Those are the 4 domains in the Danielson framework, which is what we've used for a long time in our evaluations. Educators who do not meet these will be on a plan of improvement, and there would be no advancement until expectations are met. The reason that we did this, instead of focusing on a score, because every teacher is different and expectations are different depending on where you are in your career, that we would expect proficiency of all of our teachers, so there would be some administrative discretion there on who would be put on a plan. So for example, a first-year teacher, we wouldn't expect to see all 3s across the board. But a 10-year teacher, that's a different story. Also, maybe someone has taught 2nd grade for 8 years, and then for whatever reason they move to 5th grade. That might be a different scenario as well. So, we wanted to stay within the administrator's expertise with the understanding that everybody knows what they have to do to be successful. In terms of salary compression, I did want to address that, and it sort of goes along with the funding component that we've talked about as a committee. And I just wanted to give you a brief example. We talked a lot on the committee about those teachers, in that 2nd to 6 or 7 years of experience, and how, a lot of them are clustered around 40,000 to 41,000, depending on how many credits they have and if they've done their PDP with Oregon goals. And so really the bulk of the money is in those first, I would say, 8 steps, if you want to think of them that way. Because we wanted to, those folks that have 5 years under their belts, we wanted to recognize that level of achievement, because the research shows that teachers make extreme gains in their first 5 years. And so we also wanted to address the compression issue as well. But I do want to take a liberty just to talk about compression, and I want to show you something, because I've been thinking about this a lot. And one of the things that I've been doing this for a decade, and I'm actually one of those people that I'm okay with compression. I'm not that. What compression does is it helps teachers earn their money faster, which is a good thing. So it's sort of, everyone has like a logical way of thinking and sort of a feeling way of thinking. So the logical way is that you want to make as much as you can as fast as you can, especially in public employment. And I think I've talked to you all about that before. However, I realize it feels, funny that I'm a fifth-year teacher and I'm making the same thing as a new teacher. But I just want to show you an example. And I've talked about this to the committee too. So, Jean, would you help me? Do you have a second? Okay. Oh, thanks, Leslie. All right, so I just want to show you, because I know that some of our fourth and fifth year veterans are feeling that they're not valued in Oregon. And I just want to show the board why we've done what we've done, because some of you weren't here then. So in 12-13, and you saw this in my compression memo, we raised starting salaries for new teachers to $36,000 to keep up with market pressures. That was, Act 10 was passed and implemented in 2011. So that was our first negotiation, and Act 10 was still in flux then in the courts. So we went to $36,000 to keep up with area districts. So in 13, so if you were a new teacher, you made $36,000. In 13-14, the board approved a 2.07% wage increase, as well as about a $200 payment to each teacher. And so if you moved in your second year, you went to $36,944. Is everybody following me so far? Okay. So in year 3, the board approved a 2.46% wage increase. So you were a third-year teacher, you went to $37,853. Then in year 4, 15-16, so this year, the board approved a 2% wage increase. If we had not gone to $40,000 as that fourth-year teacher, you would be at $38,610. But because the board approved a $4,000 base, you went to $40,000. So even though you're making the same as a new teacher and you have 4 years of experience, you're still better off financially than you would have been had we not done that. So I just want everybody to understand how compression can benefit you. So you have to think about what's more important. So like I would say to Jeff, as a fourth-year teacher, would you rather make $40,000 or $38,610? Now I hope Jeff would look at me, and what would you say, Jeff? Right? You want to make more. But so if I told you, well, what if that meant you were making the same as a new teacher? So now, Jeff, you can make $38,610, and a new teacher can make $36,000, or you can make $40,000 and the new teacher can make $40,000. Now what do you pick? Whichever one is greater. And so this is actually, when people come and talk to me, we go through this because I don't want them to feel like we're penalizing them. I want them to see the benefit of that. So I want you to see it as well. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't give those teachers additional compensation to deal with the compression, but I just want you to see why we've done what we've done historically. Okay, and as a committee, we've talked about it and decided that we have to deal with that compression issue. But if you'll just indulge me for one more minute, I also want to show you, if you take someone who's in their 6th year now, okay, in 12-13, they would have been at $36,891, because that was the year that we did differentiate a little bit for the first 4 years of experience. So that teacher, instead of at $36,000, was at $36,891. So if you follow the same path, they would be at $39,561 today. So that 6-year teacher right now who's making $40,000, who's feeling a little bit bad because a new teacher is making $40,000, they're still making about $500 more today than they would have had we not have done that. Okay, so is everybody following me? All right, so I just want you to see that you have made good decisions along the way that have benefited our teachers in that boat, but I'm not saying don't address it, because I think what we're hearing from the teachers is please address it. But compression is not always a bad thing. And in fact, what we've tried to do in our model is we've tried to compress as much as we possibly can while still having a model that's affordable. So are there any questions? Steve, are you?
Are you done? Yeah.
I am.
With the presentation, then we'll move on to. Everybody should have the plan before them, and now's a chance for us, in anticipation of 2 weeks, to ask any questions that you might have of Gina or Leslie or Andy who are on the committee, so that we can be better informed in 2 weeks. Brian and I are working through how that meeting is going to look to establish a process by which we can pull together ideas and thoughts in the best way possible. So let's proceed. Jeff, I'm going to work differently than going from the ends.
Just one thought right now, since we didn't get costing data, I assume it doesn't exist, and if it doesn't, will we have it in 2 weeks?
Well, I can give you, so we fill about 40 new positions every year, okay, and that's just been our historical trend. Located, being located next to the university, we have a lot of spouses or significant others that get other employment. So I say that people leave us for love. Okay? So that's, if you ask me what the transition costs are, I have an estimate, but keep in mind that 40 people is going to be a pretty big swing. If I knew historically only 2 or 3 people left, I could be a little bit more detailed. But we did look at our last meeting, and if you're looking at just to transition people onto the model, like current staff we had here today, as of 2 weeks ago, just to put them on the new model, not funding it, moving forward, but just those initial startup costs, we estimate about $1.5 million.
Any more questions, Jeff? Keep going and then let me know when you're done. Are you done? Okay, Charlie?
I have two questions. One is sort of, having been involved in this for some time and sort of reflecting on, looking back, I think there would be some value as we go forward in trying to sell this to the community in sort of renaming it. It's really about much more than teacher compensation. It's really about a way forward for the district in terms of the whole conversation we've been having about how we move the district forward in terms of individualized instruction. I mean, all those pieces come together, and I think there would be some value in sort of taking this community to talk about what this means in the context of a sort of larger discussion of where we're going as a district. The other question that really hasn't been addressed, but we've talked about in other contexts, is the issue of substitutes. And I don't know how that category is going to be impacted, if at all, by this conversation and by the compensation plan.
Well, do you mean their compensation or what that looks like in the district?
But their compensation in terms of whether that's something we're also looking at in terms of future budgets. I know we've been hard pressed often to find substitutes, and I'm just wondering if that's an area where we may also have to make some adjustments or look to how we compensate substitutes.
So Andy and I look at that every year and look at, what area districts are paying, and we've determined that we are very competitive with area districts, and actually 2 of the districts around us, we have HR director meetings, and they have said, save your money, because raising the sub rates have not changed the fill rates. It's a matter of having the people to accept the positions. It's not a matter of the pay. So, knowing that we pay a little bit less and have a 98% fill rate, and, areas around us have 98 to 99%, we felt with a priority that we haven't come to the board with a significant increase there. One of the things this plan does do is with the 5 additional professional development days, if we could spread those out throughout the calendar, that would greatly reduce our need to have subs. So we're trying to address the shortage that way. Because then, we can hopefully teachers, we can say, let's wait for those days to do collaborative, our curriculum or other things and not pull people out of the classroom. But they have to be placed correctly for us to really make the best use of those days.
That's a separate consideration then, under this plan. Okay. Charlie, any other questions or clarification issues? Gwen?
I'm sitting here thinking, I like to look around the pool table before I take a shot. You have to walk around it. Do we have a plan B? Everyone has worked so hard on this for the last 2 years. Goes to referendum. and worst-case scenario, it doesn't pass, then, has anybody been talking about that?
I think that's part of our conversation in a couple weeks or
Okay.
ongoing. Yeah.
As long, yeah, I'll wait till then.
Our committee doesn't have a Plan B.
Yeah.
We're focused on Plan A.
Yeah.
Well, and first of all, you've done a great job.
Thank you.
But I just wish, yeah. Sorry.
Any other questions, Gwen? Okay. Barb?
So in 2 weeks, when we meet, are we going to be asked to approve this, or is this a discussion?
It will be a discussion, a facilitated discussion in which
Okay.
we get people's thoughts, pro or con. Are there any hot points that you don't like, things you do like? If there are any potential changes that the board wants, just get a temperature check of where people are, but that's not tonight. Tonight's to receive the plan and also to ask any questions so that we can begin to have that question.
Okay,
And it's
but-
not an approval, I don't believe, at
In
the
2
next meeting.
weeks
Correct.
is not an
Yeah.
Will
Dan.
Donovan be there?
Brian and I are still working that out, so I don't know the answer to that. Dan?
Unfortunately, I won't be able to be at the meeting unless it goes really late on 2 weeks from now. But I really like this plan. I wanted to follow up on that $1.5 million number. And you said that would be like the first year and how much it would cost to go from what we're doing now to this plan in the first year, and that doesn't include any raises or, say, if this plan develops into something that makes teachers stay for longer periods. So then we have teachers that are on average more experienced, et cetera. Have you talked at all about the long-range costing on this? That's my first question, and then I've got one more.
Okay. So to answer your first point, in terms of the salary schedule that's in your packet, what I've talked with the OEA about, and they haven't agreed, but I've just put it on the table, that because teachers transitioning to the plan would receive an increase, that if we can get an agreement from the OEA, that would be the wage schedule for 16-17. So any money that would have gone to teacher raises would be put into the plan. So it's also a way for the OEA to invest in the plan as well, as the district. So, when you say in addition to wage increases, I've at least put it out to the OEA that 16-17, if the referendum would pass and this is our salary schedule, teachers would receive a wage increase, but it wouldn't be money on top of the schedule you see in front of you. Okay, so I've put that out there for them to consider, and Tracy seemed receptive to that, but it's a committee, it's not her decision. And she didn't give me a definitive answer either way. So we've talked about that. We've also looked at, assuming that everybody on the plan is placed where they should be and moves, when they should move, that we have looked at how much, funding it moving forward. But that assumes a lot of, it's hard for us to predict that because we don't know what our state funding looks like. We don't know what our growth looks like. We don't know what our open enrollment looks like. And so it's hard. And we don't know what the exact staff look like because obviously people, when you're looking at 40 new positions every year, even in year one, that could be a $500,000 swing. If we have experienced folks leave us and, we hire less senior folks to replace them. So we have talked about that and how long, we fund our plan going forward. And I have been very careful to tell the teachers that, there wasn't that certainty before Act 10 that you were going to be making any, X dollar because it was always subject to a bargain and the money available. And I tell them that this is no different. In fact, with the funding levels that we're at, it's a more difficult situation. So I'm very careful every time we present to not tell teachers, if the plan passes in 7 years, you'll make X, because I don't know what our funding looks like in 7 years. And I don't know what the referendum amount will be, if any. So I think what we can do is we can help staff transition to a new model, and we do what we've always done. And that's, we provide a wage increase in the amount that we can afford. I started my career bargaining contracts in districts that were very poor. So I feel like, I have a lot of tools to be able to do that. But, I hope we're not going to be in that boat a few years from now.
So back to that question then, the committee had put together a questionnaire or a survey with a number on it, and I think that was $3 million?
The range was 1 to 3 million.
1 to 3 million. And my idea, or my thought, or my guess was that the committee had had discussions with what this would cost in an ongoing basis so that we wouldn't have to ask more than we need for the first year is the idea, because the next year and the next year and the next year, we're going to, hopefully, part of this is we're going to have less attrition. Fewer people are going to leave. We're going to have a more experienced core of teachers to teach our kids, and that way. So more people are going to be towards the middle of the schedule instead of towards the beginning of the schedule. So what's the committee's best guess as something about a number that's going to get us through the foreseeable, let's say, 10 years?
I would say, we didn't have those discussions in terms about looking for the next 10 years in terms of what that would cost. Because there's so many variables to predict. I can't predict what our growth or what our state funding level is going to be in 10 years. What we did talk about is that, ultimately the number is the board's decision. And, from our standpoint, going out to referendum, best case scenario would be to have money to fund more than the first year from our perspective, but we were really hoping to look at the survey data to see what was important to the community and make the recommendation from the data and the community's input.
Any
Okay.
more questions, Dan?
Yeah, I guess I just don't understand that answer. How would we make a decision after we know what people are willing to spend? Would these numbers change, the ones on this schedule?
They could, depending on what the survey, just like the capital referendum. We went out on the capital and gave people a range about what they were, what they wanted, what direction they wanted the board to go in, and we relied on that data in developing the final plan. That was the same path that our committee was on.
Did the committee discuss then what we would need to know in order to estimate what we're going to need for the next few years? Our primary long-term, well, actually it's short-term now, is to get this passed. Mm-hmm. But we don't want to pass it in a way that's going to make it collapse after 2 or 3 years. Mm-hmm. So I was hoping that the committee could give us some guidance or at least methodology to decide if these we think are good, fair numbers, mm-hmm. as to how we decide what's the number that we have to ask for in a referendum.
Okay, we can talk about that at the May 23rd meeting.
So is the committee going to be at the May 23rd meeting?
I have asked them to attend, but I was under the impression it would be more of a board discussion, so I told them they could attend to observe, but my feeling is that you wanted time to discuss it amongst yourselves.
Right, so if this is the presentation of the committee then to us, I don't want to miss this opportunity to get all of the information from the committee, because it sounds like now it's going to be the board's deal. So this is the opportunity that I'm taking to get this information, so let's not put it off until 2 weeks from now, because one thing, I'm not going to be there, unfortunately, and another thing, we'd like to be able to mull this over a little bit, maybe between now and then, as to, what we should be thinking about when we try to decide on a number, because time's rolling on.
No, and I understand that. I guess what I can tell you is that what our plan was with the committee is to follow the same path as the capital referendum. So, for the past, we haven't, and I'm grateful we haven't had a discussion. Like if the board had said, you have $500,000, and we would have, developed a plan within those parameters. But we didn't have those parameters, so we put together the best plan to present to you of what our charge is to develop a plan to recruit, develop, and retain highly effective educators. And we feel that we have done that. So, we were looking at a partnership, with the district, with the OEA, with the community to fund it moving forward, with the understanding that I can't promise anyone what they're going to be making in 5 or 10 years. That's always been subject to funding levels.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Dan.
My second question is about the professional level E, the highest level of the professional level. And I brought this up a few months back when we were talking about this. What's the, is there an incentive at that level to continue on with the education and the improvement for teachers? Perhaps, and I'm not even sure whether from year 1 to year 2 and year 2 to year 3, there's that incentive, but certainly after the 3rd year of professional level E, it looks like that's just something that's going to be negotiated, at least within the plan, for perhaps a percentage increase, but it's not going to be on the schedule. What's the committee's thought on that, or was that discussed?
We did discuss that, and so we are required to bargain base wages with the union every year that they're a certified union. So those amounts would be subject to negotiations, but that in order to receive any increase, that you would still have to meet the tenets of the plan, and that's a successful evaluation and a completion of your professional development sequence. So, we hope that our teachers are intrinsically motivated to be the best teachers that they can be and to continue their lifelong learning, but that the teachers on professional level E, if they are at the top, that in order to receive any wage increase, they have to meet the same tenets as everyone else.
My understanding before, maybe I got this wrong, was there wasn't going to be a professional development sequence for anything that's off the chart. I mean, the sequence goes according to level and step.
No, they'd still do a sequence every 3 years.
So it doesn't matter which level they're on, they've all got a sequence.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Any more, Dan?
No, thanks.
Great, thanks. Krista?
Just a couple quick things, and I apologize if this is covered and I was new, but for 2 weeks from now, it may be beneficial to see the salary comparison of comparable school districts. One of the tenets of this plan is that keeping us highly competitive, so it would be nice to know what our competitive set is and what those new salary schedules are.
And I have been working on compiling that data. Most districts haven't decided that for next year yet.
We get that for this year?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You all set? Any more? Okay. Well, Barb said she did. Are you all set? Okay. I too would like to see some more information, at least on the costing of this. And also, it does time out. We got to work on this.
You need to talk
So-
faster.
Oh, it's the pregnant pauses.
I think somebody built the delay in there.
The first question we're going to get from the community is this sustainable and what's it going to cost over a period of time? And we don't have the answer to that right now. So I know there are a lot of variables, but one thing we can do is freeze a model and project it forward, recognizing that there are a lot of things.
The problem's on the revenue side. There's just no way to know what's going on in Madison. And
What a dollar cost there is to sustain this, and that's, I think, what we're looking for. Not revenue, it's the expense side we're looking at.
so the issue really becomes the other thing that we've talked about, which is compression. What this plan does is decompresses the salary schedule, and that has an impact on costing on an annual basis. And so the cost is fairly significant in order to just maintain this.
And that's what we need to know. So, because on page 3, There's a statement, accordingly, the committee recommends the board proceed to referendum in order to sustain this plan for the near future. Well, the prior language was 7 to 10 years, and that's changed. And, you know, if we're going to go out to referendum, that will be a question that folks are going to ask us. And, you know, in fairness to us, I think we need to have at least some answer to that question. I think that's what Dan and Krista were getting at. And the other thing people have already started asking is, where are we compared to other school districts? And then if we're comparable to other school districts, then what data or what rationale do we give for going out for referendum? Why is it important that we move on a referendum if we're comparable to other districts? We have that question. Else, we don't win. And then I think that's something all of us want to do. The other question I had is, what is your understanding, Gina, as to the base wage rate that has to be negotiated on this? And that's something I don't need tonight, but if between now and then, you know, because we have to negotiate up to a CPI, and if we're adding 1,500, that's already supplemental. My impression that most of this is supplemental, not negotiable.
I mean, CPI is 0.12%,
Yeah.
so it's almost all supplemental because that's so minimal.
Are we looking at the beginning educator level, the professional level A? Are each of those levels what you would consider base wage rate, or every number in there?
Well, you know, no one has really answered that question from a litigation, and I don't want to be the first.
That's why I asked it, Gina.
So I'm not going to go. I'm not going to go on record because I don't know where we're going to be. But I
Okay.
think that's an open subject for debate right now.
Great. Okay. Who's chosen for the bump this year?
So looking at the 5 additional days and taking an average day of $300 a day
And where does the 300 come from?
from our average teacher's daily rate.
On page 4, this is a question I've asked before. When the leading educators, we're using 5 and we have 6 buildings, and my question back then was, why not 6? What's the response?
Cost.
Okay.
And that's why we said up to 5 too. What we talked about as a committee, and Andy's been really good about getting us to think about, you know, if it were up to us, what's our priority of funding? You know, assuming we didn't have enough money to cover a step increase that year, what do we pay for first? So we talked about a committee as that's probably our, you know, that's our most, I guess, our easily negotiated point is maybe in a certain year we don't have any, or maybe we only have 1, depending on what needs are.
On that same section that on leading educators, it said they shall serve a minimum of 3 years. Was there any discussion about maximum or not?
We originally started at capping it at 3, but in looking at the other positions in the district that we've capped at 3, you know, what we found is if we've trained someone and they have an expertise in the area, that we want to keep that flexible.
To renew.
Administrations.
Okay.
That's a hiring and posting decision, so it would be filled as we do all our other positions.
Then there's the sentence that says leading educators will have more than 195 contract days depending on student needs. How is that determined, and who makes that determination?
Administration would determine that, and that would be in the posting.
I just wanted to clarify on the meet or exceed performance expectations, one of the prongs of this. Did I hear correctly that the determination of proficiency is an administrative decision based upon consideration of a number of factors, including Danielson?
Well, it would be if you were on a plan of improvement or not. So it would be really looking at your experience level and where we would expect you to be at that point in your career. So if you weren't where we expect you to be, then the administration would make the decision to place on a plan.
Okay.
Just as we do now.
So the threshold is you don't move if you're on a plan of improvement, and that's an administrative determination.
Correct.
Thank you. I understood that in terms of the professional development sequence, that they have to be tied to learning objectives. I mean, the way it is, it's ideally
Yes.
they will be, and
That would be, I mean, I think that would be, we're not requiring that, but that would be the smart way to do it, because if you're doing all the work over here, you might as well tie the two together.
chances would exist where we would allow a sequence not to be tied.
I'm trying to think of some examples off the top of my head. But for example, if a teacher was someone who in the past did not have a lot of English language learners in their classroom, however, they're anticipating a future need, they could start a professional development sequence on English language learners or cultural relevancy or something of that nature. So it might not be something that's showing up in their data now, but it may be something they are anticipating.
That sentence says it will be tied to, ideally it will be tied to blah, 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 and/or professional development plan. It seems like that circumstance clearly ties in with, but that's subject to administrative approval.
It does. We'd be looking for things that tied into our overall 5 values or school or district goals. So we're looking to bring all things together in a way that is coherent, but also allows some choice.
And then with respect to the sequence and the development of that, does that need administration approval?
Yes.
We've had a lot of discussion on master's degrees and bounce back here, and it's gone back to the committee. Does the committee set that $4,000 as the number? And what's the rationale for that from the committee's standpoint?
We really made that, Gina will address the financial association, the $4,000, but we made a decision as a committee that that is something that we value. As educators, we value people pursuing further education. And so we wanted that to be included in the plan and show up as something that we really value.
So in terms of the $4,000, that's what it's been since the 12-13 contract, and that seems to be working. So, you know, in terms of if we had increased it, that would be a cost impact. So we were kind of looking at ways to decrease the cost impact, yet still keep the integrity of the plan. And we've got teachers that are starting their degree now, so we thought, you know, in the interest of just continuity, that we would keep the $4,000 since we knew the board was already comfortable with that number.
By working, you mean incentivizing teachers to do the work to get there?
Yes, and it's further incentivized because if you'll see on level D and E, those are shaded. So if you are in professional level, or if you're beginning A or B, then you cannot move into D or E without a master's degree. So that's a further incentive for our teachers to obtain those and move over.
I'm almost done. On page 6, we talk about creating a period, the first 2 years where you move from the just cause standard to an arbitrary and capricious. Is that really part of the plan, or is that something for the board to consider relative to the handbook?
So what we talked about with our plan is that if you are in the beginning educator levels, that you would be on probation, and that it would be an arbitrary and capricious standard while you were on probation. So once you completed your 5 years, when you moved to the professional level A, at that point you would have just cause. So that was another accountability piece that we built in to say that, you know, if at any time during those 5 years that you weren't performing up to expectations, that it would be a probationary, arbitrary, and capricious standard. But then once you had those 5 years of experience, assuming you were performing successfully, you would jump to professional level A, at which point you would have just cause. If you were new to our district and came in at a professional level, then we would have the 2-year probationary period that was in the collective bargaining agreement prior.
If I'm at professional educator level E and I'm at the completion of that sequence and I'm not a leading educator, this plan includes, it doesn't cap you yet, so there's a roll-up?
Well, it would be subject to negotiation because right now we have to negotiate base wages every year. If you're talking about if you're at level E, step 3 at the top.
I understand, yeah. Assuming that's a base wage at that level.
Assuming that, yes.
Okay. And lead educator salary is blank there. Can you explain that?
And that is a change that we have. What we talked about is that depending on what the needs are, that we may have teachers in the various professional levels that want to be a leading educator. So if we made that let's just pretend that the salary was $75,000, that just seemed a little unrealistic for someone who was making $50,000, to jump to $70,000 for 3 years and then go back to 50. So really what we looked at is, let's say we had a professional level A person at the 54,000, then we would pay, based on what we're asking them to do. If they did like 210 days, then we would just pay for the extra days, similar to what we do right now for administrative interns.
So they would be making less than the level below them?
Less than the level below them.
Yeah.
They would be making what their regular salary would be, plus an additional amount for the additional workload.
I always thought the leading educator would be at a salary level above.
And that's what we had proposed originally, and then just in talking about it, that let's say we need a leading educator to implement a new math curriculum initiative, so to speak, and that the person who we absolutely wanted in that role was, a level B3 at 59,000. That what we heard back from staff too is that, well, that would just be really hard to move up to that salary for 3 years and then potentially move back, and does that really make sense in the way we envision that role? So we felt it gave the teachers more flexibility in the role and gave us more flexibility, and could potentially be a cost savings.
Yeah, that's a big paradigm shift from the career ladder model.
It is. I think if you wanted to go a different direction, then, there wouldn't be a cap on those years, and that would be sort of where, assuming the person was doing a good job, that's where they would end their career.
More questions? Last go around, anybody that generate any more questions? Charlie?
Couple quick comments. One, I think it's really important that we move ahead very quickly on this. November is going to be approaching, I think, very shortly, and I would like to see us, as a part of a conversation on the 23rd, talk very specifically about how we want to move this agenda forward in terms of referendum coming up in the fall. The second thing is just as an observation, as really a point of perspective. Looking at the salaries on the schedule, I think it looks like a lot of money. On the other hand, an MBA with no years of experience, average starting salary is $95,000, with a typical $15,000 bonus, signing bonus. Every professional, whether it's architects or doctors or lawyers, gets trained by a teacher. And I think it's important, as we had our conversation about this with the community, to place this in a perspective.
Okay, I think we're ready to have our conversation in 2 weeks. Do you have a question, Gwen?
First of all, Krista, you had, okay. For the beginning educator, a maximum of 5 years, is there leeway when you use the word maximum? Can it be 3 years? Or for the, on probation, 5 years seems like a long time. And historically, it's been 2. That's on the last page, 6. And I'm just curious. I'm not, I have no opinion about it at this point, but.
So our thinking was really twofold, if I might say. Our thinking was twofold. One is that research says that you make such significant gains
Also have a second question. Do you believe, this seems very innovative, is this an innovative plan?
Well, I think we started out with a more innovative plan, and what we learned is that
Leslie and Gina, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks everyone for the questions. We've got work to be done on the 23rd. Dan, I'll be in touch with you to try to get some thoughts within the context of how we're going to proceed on the 23rd so that your voice can be heard in there with the ideas. And the plan to have is to focus on ideas and move from that point. So that takes us to the next agenda item, and that is informational items. Brian, open enrollment update.
I gave most of the open enrollment update in our staffing conversation, but I'll just swing some big numbers past you. Currently, we have 259 students that our registrar, Katie, has rolled forward, which means they're not seniors, and we anticipate them returning next year. So that's 259. Current students attending that open enroll out kids, it's approximately 60. Right now, our open enroll in applications is around 108, and we've been around 100 applications open enrolled in for the last several years. Our open enroll applications out are roughly 47. So I wouldn't call this a big year. We've had bigger years in terms of open enroll applications in, but we could potentially have over 300 open enroll in students at the end of the year. And if all of the open enroll out applications left, we'd have close to 100 going out. So that's the update. We'll continue to keep you posted on that because it has budget implications. Do you want me to just keep going, Steve?
Yeah, why don't you then, unless there are any questions on that. Okay.
I'm happy to take questions.
I think one of the things that you can do, Brian, is give us in an in-betweener on a regular basis the open enrollment update as it pertains to or impacts class sizes. So that form we got in the staffing with the sections, just roll it up in that because that was a good graphic visual. All right.
Will do.
DPI land transfer hearing.
Yes.
This relates to the Stoughton and the Belleville
correct
petitions?
Yeah, the Stoughton, that family is the Noka family, and their hearing is on May 19th at 9 o'clock at DPI. I've typically attended those to support the family, so my plan was to attend that hearing to support the family, because oftentimes the board members, if you're not familiar with how the hearing works, there are 3 board members that get appointed by Dr. Evers, 3 school board members from across the state, and they hear the petitions. They'll hear the petition, the Noka family's petition, and they'll also hear comment/testimony from the Stoughton School District, and then I will make some comments on behalf of the NOCAS. So that's next Thursday at the 19th. Then the following Tuesday on the 24th will be the Fortier/Boyle family. That's the family, I'll call it the Belleville property, where some of their property is in our district and other properties not in our district. So I will attend both of those hearings at DPI. If any of you are interested in coming along, just give me a call, and it probably won't be as exciting as you think it is, but you're welcome to come along if you wish.
Regarding that? Okay, superintendent's report.
Since you've heard a lot from me already tonight, I was thinking of just narrowing it to one item that Steve asked me to bring along, and you should have in front of you a copy of this Thursday's board planning meeting, and there's three meeting objectives that Steve and I have been working on, and I will say we have it divided into three main sections. The first activity, I guess the first activity is supper and check-in. There will be a light Janie soup and sandwich kind of dinner on Thursday night, and that starts at 5:30. If you get there a few minutes early, that's terrific as well. We typically start with, I called it icebreaker activity. I probably should have called it an inclusion activity to get us started, and Steve and I are going to work on that together. Then item number 2 is governance and operations, and Steve is going to take the lead with that conversation. And then lastly, establishing and prioritizing 2016/17 board initiatives. And Steve has asked me to take the lead on facilitating that conversation. And I can see that the collective commitments and information protocol is probably going around for your review. So that's all I was going to report on tonight, and I'd also ask Steve if he has any comments to make about Thursday's session.
You should have parking passes at your desk at Union South, and really the focus of this is the third one is to establish and prioritize our initiatives for 16 and 17. The governance and operations is just to review for all of our purposes the collective commitments, reaffirm them if we so desire, to talk about some of the logistical things for the next year, including committees. And then Brian will facilitate us in moving on the visioning. So that's Thursday. And then future agenda, and if anybody has any questions on that, give Brian or me a shout out. And then on closing, future agenda, you have the May 23rd draft agenda. I know one thing that has to go on there is public comment, Janie, on the agenda. And then the focus of that is just on the educator compensation plan and the discussion on that. Brian?
Steve, we weren't exactly sure. I thought we talked about starting at 6, so I asked Janie to put it together at 6, but I just want to double check with board members if that's okay.
And Netherwood in the cafeteria.
Correct. So just note that change time from a typical board meeting.
Great. Dan?
I just had a question as to whether we had sought any legal counsel about having a meeting outside of the school district boundaries. We'd been advised 2 or 3 years ago by the WASB council that was not something that we could do if we could avoid it in some way. Did we get an opinion of council that says we can do this at Union South?
Gina? Yeah, I asked Gina about that.
Yes, so I consulted with one of the WASB attorneys, and it's my opinion, and he agrees that the meeting has to be reasonably accessible, and that the Madison area would be considered reasonably accessible.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure of that because I know that'd been a conversation, that the facility works out nice for us. It's a break, but it does comply with open meeting laws according to our legal opinion. So we will see everybody there on Thursday night for a good conversation. Checkout. Let's start down here. Nina, anything additional?
Just that I just got a notification that my room draw time for my dorm is tomorrow at 4 p.m. and I'm going to be fighting all the other freshmen for the dorm I want. So if you could just be thinking about me, that'd be good.
Yeah, this has been somewhat of an interesting and special board meeting for me because it's my birthday today.
Well, you should have let us known.
So we're actually planning some celebration stuff this coming weekend with a trip to Kopke's greenhouse. So.
Good for you. Happy birthday. Gwen?
I was going to say happy birthday, Charlie. And there's something else I was going to say, but I just forgot. I do want to say I planted all my seed from my front and backyard today, and hopefully it rains. Oh, I remember. What is your name? Johnny? That T-shirt is awesome, and I have been laughing the entire time tonight because it really is funny. So thank you very much for wearing that, and thank you for the job that you do.
Dan?
Nothing, thanks.
Krista? Oh, nothing from Krista. Just a brief point from me. Just to highlight how much our school district attracts folks to the Oregon area. On Saturday, we hosted the hometown games, which is the Special Olympics, and a big shout out to Oregon High School, Mike and the Ned Lees, who make the facility available. Chris Getz, I think, still plays an instrumental role with the Oregon team, but we've hosted that for many years. It's a phenomenal site. I think we're hosting it again next year. If you haven't been there, go there. But at the same time, we had a tennis match going on, and the high school baseball team played. And then when all that was done, we had a soccer meet or match at Oregon High School. So it was a really, really busy day in the Oregon school community. So it's a big shout out to us in the district who make our facilities available for a lot of worthwhile causes. And with entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second? Second. All
Second.
in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Thanks, everyone. Great meeting. We adjourned at 9:22. See you Thursday.